My name is Dixie Peters. I'm an exercise physiologist here at the Rec Center, and I want to talk to you today about lower cross syndrome. So this is a very common problem with almost everyone. If you don't have a little bit of this problem, then you are very lucky. This hits home with me because I've always kind of had this issue. As an avid cyclist and weight trainer, I like to lift heavy. So with that being said, I'm going to explain what lower cross syndrome is, and we'll go into the specifics of how to fix it. So what lower cross syndrome is you have really tight hip flexors, which in turn causes your lower back to be very tight. Your lower back muscle is shortened up, trying to compensate for having really tight hips, and that's the general issue that I always have. With that being said, your glutes are typically weak, and your core is weaker than you would hope it is. So your core and your glutes are inhibiting the movement for your body to be smooth and effective. So with that being said, you can think of it kind of like an X, so lower cross syndrome, because our body wants to work together as much as possible, and we want to try to make that better for you. So with that said, how to fix it. So stretching and foam rolling is probably the number one way I would do that before anything. You can't get stronger without gaining mobility and flexibility with different movements in your joints and muscles. So I will show you how to stretch and do some foam rolling with your quadriceps and your glutes. And number two, I'll show you how to strengthen your core while also keeping your hips in that lengthened position, so you're not overusing your legs when you're doing those core exercises. And I'll also show you how to strengthen your glute medius and your hips, your hip abductors and adductors, maybe a little differently than you've tried in the past. So that's kind of what we're going to do. So here we go. So number one, again, foam rolling and stretching before strengthening. I'm going to show you just some simple stretches. I have a tennis ball here and a foam roller. So another word for your hip flexors is your psoas. It kind of sounds like sore ass, which is kind of similar to that, but that's how I kind of remember that. But with the foam roller or a tennis ball, you are going to lengthen the leg where you want to focus on that hip first. If I were you, I would focus or grab a foam roller that has a more distinctive edge to it. And what you want to try to do is get as close to the ground as possible. And you're pretty short with your movement. Sometimes people can't feel it using the foam roller because it's a little hard to get good pressure on the psoas this way. But this is again one way to foam roll the hips. If that does not seem to work for you, I would highly recommend a tennis ball or lacrosse ball. You can get a lot deeper this way. So again, you're lengthening that leg and you're bending the opposite leg right at your hip. Now it looks kind of funny when you do this if people don't really know what's under there, because it kind of looks like you're humping the floor, but it is what it is. You just need to make sure you keep good pressure on that leg when you're doing this. And you'll know when you hit that spot because it'll feel like a funny bone. It'll feel kind of tender. You can, again, you're not moving very much. You can push and hold, or you can move just a little bit back and forth, side to side. So this is your psoas. This is one way to make that feel a little bit better if you're always in that flex position. I know as an avid cyclist, you're always in that flexed hip position, even when you do a lot of squats and deadlifts, or if you sit a lot, you're still in that flexed hip position. So you need to really make sure that you're trying to lengthen and extend your body as much as possible. The other thing I'm going to show you with the foam roller is just a general quadricep. So with that, again, similar to what I just did, you're getting a little bit more on the side where the IT band is, and then you're trying to stay as close to the ground as possible, just trying to loosen up that quadriceps as much as you can. you're staying above your kneecap and just below your hips when you do this on both sides, lateral or towards the ground. I would highly recommend doing this as much as possible. The other thing with the foam roller is for the glutes. So whatever side you're trying to focus on with the foam roller, you can cross that leg over, and I want you to lean over that glute as much as you can. Now, if you're kind of like me, I kind of have a hard ass. So this, I rarely feel this doing anything. I can kind of feel it, but honestly, it's not really loosening anything. So right now I'm kind of hitting that sciatic nerve right there, kind of where my hamstrings and my glutes tie in. So what I like to do is use a medicine ball. I find that the surface area is smaller, plus the surface of the medicine ball is a lot harder, and it just works much better within a very short time. So again, I can circle with the medicine ball, just go up and down, or I can just hold it there. And this is just another way to lengthen all these muscles, kind of loosen them up before you use them. So with that being said, I'm now going to show you some strengthening exercises. But before I do that, I almost forgot. I'm going to show you some lengthening things for your hips and your quads. So if you have any sort of step stool, you might have a couch at home that you can use. You might have a chair. All right, so I would put something underneath your knee, and you can lean back against that surface. I have a dowel here if you don't want to lean back that far. This is a really good way to stretch out your quadriceps. With that being said, just make sure, as I'm doing this, just be gradual with it, and just lean back as much as you can, trying to keep your pelvis neutral. So again, this is a really good quadriceps stretch. Another one, without putting your foot up on the stool, is a basic hip flexor stretch. I call this the football coach look. I highly recommend being in this position as much as you can versus a seated position with both of your hips flexed. So you can push the dowel into the floor, you can lean forward, you can lean back, you can hold your arm up, you can hold the dowel straight up. Just think about pushing that back leg into the floor, and you're just gradually rotating or shifting that weight forward and backward. So hip flexors, quadriceps, you're going to feel this in both of those areas. Now I'm going to show you some strengthening things. Just remember, it's easy to try to strengthen before you lengthen, and before you stretch. Try not to do that. I know everyone, especially myself, is kind of stubborn sometimes, so I don't always like to stretch out until I strengthen everything. Now we're going to strengthen some of these things. So I'm going to show you some core strengthening exercises, and I'm going to focus on doing that without flexing at your hips. So if you have a band at home or at the gym, you can do this a couple different ways. Just anchor it to a surface. You're gonna, again, you're not moving those hips. You're trying to keep your hips square to wherever you're facing, okay? And you're really trying to focus on squeezing those abs in as tight as you possibly can, both directions. If you want it a little bit easier, you can lengthen the band, have a little less tension on it, and get a little bit more rotation through your torso and your spine. So again, this is one of the core exercises that is good without overusing your hips. Another one would be using a Bosu ball. I like using the Bosu ball. You can use the floor without the Bosu ball, but I like this because, again, I'm lengthening my legs and I'm going to work on extension through my spine. So I want to find that spot on the Bosu ball where I'm not directly on the floor, but I'm just above the ground with my butt. And as I do this, I want to keep my feet anchored, and I want to extend back. I'll feel that nice stretch all the way through my spine, And I don't want to sit up that far. So roughly, you're sitting up parallel to the ground. And just again, focus on the movement, focus on the breathing. Think about lengthening your body. Even though you're flexing it, this is more important to feel that stretch and lengthen it. I call this a decline sit-up on the BOSU ball. This is another way. Another good core exercise, with or without the BOSU ball, is doing a side plank. So again, you're not flexing your hips. Your knee can be down, okay? Your legs can be straight. If I keep my knee down, all right? So again, this is a perfect one to practice stability and core. You can even add that hip abduction. So again, I'm just giving you options. Another way is just a simple plank or forward plank with or without the BOSU ball. As I do this, I'm pushing against the surface of the BOSU and I'm trying to lengthen my legs as much as I possibly can. So a lot of times people that have really, really tight hip flexors, they'll kind of have a slight bend. But this one I really want you to focus on pushing those heels back and you're lengthening as much as possible, which will make it a little bit harder, but you'll get more out of it that way. And I just went over a couple of different core exercises. As far as strengthening your hips and your glutes, I'm going to show you some ones that most people probably don't do on a regular basis. One of them is against the wall. And if you think about walking with our gait and our pelvis in alignment, generally we're not always doing that with our weight distributed evenly on both feet. So this is going to kind of help us practice, and it is putting pressure on your glute medius when you do it. So you can try this at home, see what you think. I'm going to do one set for now, but I would recommend doing maybe 2 or 3 sets for 10 to 15 reps. See how that treats you. But if you find a wall, you're not leaning too much against it, but you want to stand up kind of straight. Your inside leg, you're going to flex at your hip. Your outside leg obviously balances you. So this is called a standing hip drop. So what you're going to do is you're going to drop your hip, and then you're going to square your body back up to the wall. So drop, and then square it up. And if you do this roughly 10 to 15 times, you're going to feel that glute medius and that hip working on the outside leg more than you think it will. This is also kind of a good thing to practice, just keeping that weight distributed evenly. When I first did this, I really noticed which side my weak side was. And again, I'm not moving tremendously because it's a pretty small area. So it's going to burn a lot quicker than your major muscle groups. Can you see how I'm doing that? Dropping and then squaring back up to the wall. Dropping my hip out and then squaring up. And it's burning pretty good. Eventually you're going to do that on both sides. So again, just briefly I'll show you. Standing hip drop, drop out, and then square up. Drop out, square up. So try this at home. This is again one of those things you can strengthen those hips and the glutes at the same time. The other one I'm going to show you is on the floor, okay? You don't need any equipment. So if you lie on your side, you're going to try to keep your hips in alignment when you do this. This is working on hip flexion, extension, and hip abduction. So again, you're trying to get higher reps, 10 to 15. See how that treats you? You're going to bend the top leg, and you're going to drop your knee towards the ground. So you're now in that flexed hip position. So you're starting here. You're going to keep your toe pointed down slightly and extend that leg all the way back. And then you're going to lift it up, and then down, and back, and up, and down. And see how that treats you through the hips and the glutes. I'll do a few more reps. Flex at the hip, extension, hip abduction. And being on the floor just kind of reminds me to keep my pelvis in alignment. It's a lot easier to do that on the floor. And again, try this on both sides. You'll definitely notice once you do this which side is weaker than the other. So I just showed you two maybe different ways to strengthen your glutes and your hips. I know a lot of people do hip thrusters with a barbell. They might do side steps with a band. They might do straight leg raises in a standing position. They might do a machine hip abduction or hip adduction. Those are all fine and dandy. I'm just showing you different ways to do that. Because a lot of times we overcompensate with our strong muscles and we don't necessarily focus on the things that are tight and weak. So whether you're a power lifter, bodybuilder, triathlete, whether you're mainly into fitness classes and you just do maybe Pilates classes, we all have to be well-rounded when we're thinking of our health and fitness. So I think everything is good. I don't recommend not doing one thing. I'd like to think of it as a whole. So I just talked about lower cross syndrome. Whether you have an anterior pelvic tilt, it's kind of like Daffy Duck, where your pelvis is tilted forward, or you might have more of a posterior pelvic tilt, where it's more like a Pink Panther, where your tailbone kind of tucks under. With either of those body types, we all can benefit from improving our glutes and hip strength and stretching and thinking about our core and not overusing our hips when we do the core exercises. And again, stretching and foam rolling is going to benefit more than anything. So I hope that you learned a little bit from that. Just remember, none of us are perfect. We all got something wrong with us, and we just have to learn how to work through those issues so that we can move a lot better. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.